Hello, good evening, everybody. Here in Ohio, it's another episode of the Saturday Spiritualist, and I hope it's all going to go smoothly. The last episode of this Uncanny Earth, once again, my laptop turned off, lost power, and so what I'm going to do is I have my alternate setup ready just in case, which is basically my phone with my headset and everything all set up. I've got StreamYard pulled up, and I can jump into it at a moment's notice in case something really bad goes on. So, um, yeah. So here we are, the Saturday Spiritualist. If you've been following along every week on Saturday night, which is tonight, or if you're watching tomorrow, then it's not tonight anymore. But every week, Saturday, 10 p.m., I do a segment where I talk about a particular spirituality that exists out in the world that I may not have been super familiar with before. Some of them I will have been, some of them I won't. And I'm going to try to learn a little bit about them and teach you guys about them at the same time and show you some different options. If you're trying to be more of a spiritual person and you're trying to look at what's out there, I'm going to help kind of simplify that for you. So far, we've looked at Wicca, we've looked at Thelema, good old Aleister Crowley. Now, this week is going to be something a little bit different because this isn't particularly, uh, it's not actually a spirituality. It kind of is, but it's also kind of an elaborate joke and philosophical talking point. And I'm including it because I think it's important to include these kind of things because you're going to get this when you talk to people about spirituality. And I don't advocate arguments about this kind of stuff. I think spirituality and religion should be very personal things that you should mostly just keep to yourself unless somebody asks you about it. Um, and they're open to listening to what you have to say. Whether they're going to convert or whether or not is really besides the point. I don't advocate people going out and proselytizing and going out and trying to convert people by convincing them and things like that. So, but if you do get into a bit of a discussion, you may run into some of these folks or some really hardcore, like atheist style people, and and it's interesting to know where they're coming from. It's important to know their point of view just as much as you want them to know yours. Okay, so tonight's is gonna be an interesting one, and uh, and it is about Pastafarianism, which is the worship of the flying spaghetti monster. You heard that right. If you've never heard of this before, this is going to be enlightening. If you have heard about it, you're going to probably chuckle at least a little bit. Now, the flying spaghetti monster, um, the guy who came up with this, his name is Bobby Henderson. He came up with it in 2005. And he didn't necessarily intend it to be a religion or a spirituality or a movement of any kind. He was just trying to make a point. He was an atheist, basically. Um, and he was in Kansas, and the Kansas State Board of Education was deciding to permit intelligent design in their science classes for public school. Now, what is intelligent design? Intelligent design is a both scientific and religious outlook that says that things that happen out in the scientific world and out in the universe and whatnot couldn't have happened without a guiding hand of some kind, which is either Jehovah or whoever. Um, so that's intelligent design. Um, he understandably was kind of irritated because if you let's get my thoughts on this first too because I think he would kind of had a point because if you're going to public school and you're learning science classes, I think science classes should stick to human science as we know it. I don't think we should be including things like intelligent design that can't be proven. And I'm not saying it's not true. I'm not going out and saying, oh, if you believe in intelligent design, you obviously don't know what you're talking about. I'm not saying that. I'm not, because I don't know. I don't have any evidence for it or against it other than what I've seen in my day to day. I cannot tell you that you are wrong because to you it's right. Okay. Um, and you believing that doesn't hurt me any. So what do I care? Right. Um, but I do think teaching things in schools should be based 100% on verifiable fact. All history, all historical things, all science, all that stuff should be verifiable fact. I don't think there should be anything up in the air about it. Um, so Bobby Henderson, he sent this letter, and in the letter, this is according to Wikipedia, he demanded equal time in science classrooms for flying spaghetti monsterism alongside intelligent design and evolution. And he meant this to be satire. He meant it to be parody. Um, and another group uses this to their advantage in a more serious way. The modern Church of Satan does this all the time. You may have read in the news several times over the past number of years how they've been saying, hey, you know what? If you're going to have a prayer in your courthouse or in your government institution to whatever deity, you need to also let us have a prayer. Or if you're going to have a statue like a nativity, you should let us have a statue or a nativity. Because if it's fair to you, it should be fair to everybody. It's religious freedom. And while that's a little bit of a push button thing, they do have a point. Um, because we have separation of church and state, and whether you agree with that or not, if we have it, it should apply all across the board. If you're going to have separation of church and state, it should be a separation of all church and state. It should be, you shouldn't have any sort of favoritism compared to other ones. So they do have a point. And this is kind of where he was getting at. Bobby Henderson was on this, and so he created this deity that is basically two eyes attached to a pair of noodles of a mound of spaghetti with a pair of meatballs. Okay, and that's the flying spaghetti monster. Let me go down and tell you about. Let's see. Now, this is what he said about it. He satired creationism, and he said that the flying spaghetti monster is a supernatural being that cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be experienced, but they know it exists, so therefore you have to give it equal time, which makes sense. And they asked him if he had a problem with religion. And he says no. He says, what I have a problem with is religion posing as science. If there is a God and he's intelligent, then I would guess he has a sense of humor. And that's an interesting point. That's something that I have said before. A lot of people are in favor, well, maybe not a lot. I mean, there's a solid core of people, and we've talked about this recently within the last few episodes of on this Uncanny Earth. We talked about how there's still some church denominations of the different faiths that still follow things like the Old Testament, like Leviticus and stuff like that, which is really harsh. And it's like the areas that say don't eat shellfish and don't eat this and don't eat ham and don't suffer a witch to live and things like that, and some really harsh things, and don't get that tattoos and don't get this. And I would think my argument has always been that a perfect being that decides to create something is not going to create something that's imperfect because it's a perfect being. Whereas an imperfect being, if it's possible to create, if it's powerful enough to create things, it's going to create imperfect things. So I don't think that if there is a creator out there, and I'm not saying there is or isn't, just as a philosophical experiment, if there is, then it is an imperfect being because it creates imperfect beings. And that explains why there's there's quote unquote evil in the world and bad things happen because the being that if it created everything was not perfect itself. Now, does that make this being irresponsible? Possibly. Does that make it immoral? Maybe. Um, you could go a lot of different directions with that. But a perfect being would be 100% immoral because it wouldn't need the concept of morals. It would say, in its view of perfection, there's only one choice. So you wouldn't get good and evil. You wouldn't get this or that. You'd only get this, and that would be perfect. So an imperfect being, I think, would have a sense of humor, like Bobby Henderson is saying. Um, and after he sent this public letter, his ideas got really big on the internet, as they do. And so he published the responses he got from the school board, who were angry about it. He said he got thousands of emails within a year of the letter, and he said that they were about 60,000 plus, and 95% have been supportive, while the other 5% have said, "I'm going to hell," which would make sense. Let me go down a little bit. He has a series. Well, he has written one book. He's written one book called The Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which he wrote after he got an $80,000 advance from book publisher Villard Books, and they're a part of Random House. So he wrote The Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, which is a pretty. I've read parts of it, and it's funny. It definitely repeats itself a lot, and it is an attempt basically to be as jokey as possible. So it's not, if you're looking for serious stuff in it, there isn't much. Different people on before it had come out, the people on his website in his chat rooms and things had gathered together all the various things that other people had thought of to go along with it, and they called it the loose canon, Canon, loose canon, get it? Which is the Holy Book of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and it was completed in 2010 after the other book had come out, and it's kind of a companion. Now, some of the things that they say on it, it has a verse called Suggestions 1:1. I am the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Thou shalt have no other monsters before me. Afterwards is okay. Just use protection. The only monster who deserves capitalization is me. Other monsters are false monsters, undeserving of capitalization. So you can see where some of the jokes are from here. They also have a third text called the New Testament of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, Dinner 2.0, also known as the New and Improved Recipe. And one of the quotes from that is, "We need never doubt our divine carbohydrate, for even our DNA is shaped like a noodle, so we know that pasta is holy." It's interesting stuff. And it has some practical things in here. It has it's better if you do's and it's better if you don'ts, which are kind of like it's 10 commandments kind of. And there are 10 of them. For the it's better if you do's, it's better if you find a thing you are good at. It's better if you live in harmony with the world. It's better if you make art. It's better if you lead an untethered life. It's better if you work together. Now, the untethered life thing I think is kind of interesting because that kind of reminds me. And then in the better if you don't, you'll see what I mean. It reminds me of the people who are into low grade communism kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that these people are communists or like when I say low grade, I mean they're the people who think that you shouldn't own anything. You shouldn't own houses or property or whatever. Everything should be communal and everything should be whatever. So you should be able to give away whatever you want whenever you want, which I don't really agree with. I believe we should be allowed to have stuff, and having stuff is important, even though it shouldn't be as big of a status symbol as it is. I think it's important that we have things to call our own. But in the next part, it's better if you don't. It's better if you don't put people in cages. It's better if you don't work too much. It's better if you don't value possessions, and that's where my other little thing came up. It's better if you don't hurt others, and it's better if you don't censor things. So there's the 10, like the 10 rules basically. Um, so all in all, it has some interesting ideas, but it's I wouldn't consider it a spirituality. However, it got large enough that they have pushed in different parts of the world for legal recognized status as a religion. And in most places they really haven't gotten it yet because a lot of courts have recognized that it's a joke and it's a parody. So they're not going to put it on equal footing, which is kind of it it's kind of making their point for them because there are a lot of religions and a lot of spiritualities in there, and a lot of them, there are a lot that are just somebody thought something up in their basement or in their bedroom or in a backyard, and we're just like, hey, I think this is the right way to do things. And they gathered enough people and they gathered a large enough group, and word spread, and eventually they had a group of like-minded individuals, and they called themselves a church. I mean, it's not uncommon. It happens a lot, and sometimes you call them cults, which is, there's a lot of brainwashing and a lot of that kind of stuff going on, but not every time. And so, like I said, it's kind of proving their point that the playing field isn't equal. It isn't equal. In New Zealand, they do have the ability to perform civil marriage ceremonies, which is interesting. They are licensed to do that in New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is kind of a weird place. The last few years, they got extra weird, and they thought that they knew better than everybody, and they paid the price for that. But that's most I'm going to say about that. Um, However, it's interesting to note that at least there, and I think in a couple other places, it's been recognized as a legal entity. Now, what does this all mean? Um, is it a spirituality or isn't? And that kind of brings us to the nature of spirituality, which is something I touched on at the beginning of the series in episode 1. To be spiritual isn't necessarily to be attached to a set of hard and fast rules and dogmas and things. It's a way for you to feel fulfilled in your mind and in your life, and it's a way to help you feel like a better person. And that's not at the expense of the people. Like some people, there are people who go to big churches and they say, "Oh, I'm giving so much money to charity this month, and that makes me a great person," and they feel good about it. But it's they go out and they tell everybody about it, like, "Oh, it's a big deal," and it's really shallow. Yeah, maybe it is helping people, but the way you're approaching it is really kind of shallow. But the point still, for any type of spiritual activity, is to improve yourself without causing harm or denigration to other people around you. It's to make yourself a better person mentally and in your attitude and everything, or at least as good as you can get. So, does the flying spaghetti monster improve the lives of the people who quote unquote believe in him? A lot of people would say yeah, because it's humorous, it makes them laugh, and yeah, there probably is a core of people who are in it basically just to stick it to the Christians or to stick it to the whoever, and you're going to get that everywhere. The Church of Satan has a long history of trying to stick it to the Catholics, and that's kind of their shtick. And that's why I've never been a member, because as much as you might find some interesting ideas in there, and we're going to touch on it later, so I'm not going to get too deep on it, but the whole aspect of Satan isn't even like a real person, it's an idea rather than a like you're actually worshiping a devil or a demon. The actual accredited Church of Satan doesn't is kind of atheist, actually, and we'll get to that later. But it basically what they're trying to do is just stick it, like I said, stick it to the Catholics, stick it to the Christians. But there are a lot of people who are in it for the humor, and they believe, you know what, this makes me feel good about life. I don't take things too seriously anymore. I enjoy my I enjoy my life more than I did before, and I'm not as depressed. I'm not as like, what happens next? Um, and so I think it serves its purpose. Whether it's actually a true spiritual idea or not, I think is kind of irrelevant, because I think it does help people feel spiritual on a certain level, even if they might not admit it, even if they believe they're hardcore atheist. I think they end up being a little spiritual anyway. Um, my nose is itching. Sorry. Um, so it's an interesting point. And this episode isn't going to be as long as some of the other ones, because there's not as much to it, because the whole thing about the flying spaghetti monster is pretty simple. It's pretty start to finish. This is what it was for. This is what they do. There's some other parts to it, like they say that pirates were the first believers in the flying spaghetti monsters, like actual swashbuckling pirates back in the day, and that so they take part in different things, like Talk Like a Pirate Day, and stuff like that. Um, so there's a lot of quirky things in there, and it borders on absurdism, which is a legitimate thing. Also, we'll get to that later, and I probably should have folded this into that to make a more robust episode. But I kind of want to spend some more time on that specifically as a concept in its own space. So yeah, I believe that the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster can be a legitimate thing for some people. It's not for me, um, but if it's for you, by all means. There are other things out there, like people have made an actual recognized religion based on the Jedi from Star Wars, and that's recognized in the United Kingdom as an actual religion, which we're going to get into in another future show. So if they can do that, why not a flying spaghetti monster? It can't be any more silly than how Mormonism started. And if you are a Mormon, I'm not trying to make you angry or make you upset, but you do kind of have to look back at how that got started and kind of acknowledge, okay, there's some murkiness there. You know, there is some murkiness there. And Scientology, same thing with Scientology. Again, I'm not, if you believe it and if it makes you feel like a fulfilled person, fine. It doesn't matter what I have to say about it, right? But wink. Um, so that's that. That's the flying spaghetti monster. And the basis of all that is that he was trying to communicate that you shouldn't just believe everything you read, and that if it can't be proven, then you shouldn't advance it as fact. And if you're going to advance it as fact, whether it can be proven or not, then you have to open the floor to everything else that can't be proven as fact. And I think that's a salient point. So, um, so that's what I got for it. Like I said, it was a short episode because it's more of like a side topic, because it's not. It's only been around since 2005, and it's more of a satire thing than anything else. But it is a good counterpoint to everything else that we're talking about. Business wise, what else do we have going on? Today's Saturday. Tomorrow is Sunday, so there's a free day. Monday will be another episode of Let's Talk About This. I'm not entirely sure. I have a couple ideas what I'm going to talk about, but I'm not quite there yet. Tuesday will be another Twitch Tuesday where I play a game that I've never played before. And let's see. Wednesday is a free day. I might do some streaming Wednesday. I might do some streaming, just random streaming, not like my Tuesdays, but I might do some regular Twitch streaming. I might play that wizardy game that we're not supposed to be playing, or that I might play Atomic Heart, which is another game that apparently we're not supposed to play because Ukraine doesn't like it. But whatever. I'm not here to talk about those topics. I'm not. We don't get into that. I have my own thoughts, and I'm not interested. So, and then of course, Thursday will be another episode of the Uncanny Spirits Club in our run up to St. Patrick's Day, and then that Friday will be another episode of This Uncanny Earth. We have a guest. I don't believe this guest will be on camera, but they will be calling in audio wise. So it'll be Rob, myself, and the audio for the guest. The week after that, I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the week after that, which will be the week of the 16th, I will be live on the 16th on that Thursday for my St. Patrick's Day episode. And I don't think that's St. Patrick's Day itself, but that's the closest time that I had some time to work with. And I will be live, and I'm going to give the link to StreamYard out publicly in This Uncanny Earth group and maybe a couple other places. Carefully, I don't want a huge mob of people, but I am going to invite people to join me on St. Patrick's Day, have some drinks, and call in and talk to me about things, and just have a good time. It's going to be a bit of a party. So I will be doing Irish car bombs, which I think there's a more politically correct name for them now. I've heard them called cement mixers, but a cement mixer is an entirely different drink, and we will not be having those. But we will be having Irish car bombs, and I like those. I enjoy those. And that's it. That's all I got for you tonight. Like I said, short episode. Tune in next week for something a little more lengthy. I believe I'm going to start delving into some left-hand path ideals, getting in maybe into, we might look at the Temple of Set, maybe the Church of Satan, that kind of stuff. I don't want to scare people, be like, oh, he's going to talk about Satan. Oh, no. But I'm not going to be talking about actual dark sacrifices and demon worship and things like that, because, that's not what this is about. So we're not going to get into that. We're going to get into the visible churches and temples that are out there. And we'll go from there. Okay. So yeah, it's been a short one. That's okay. Flying Spaghetti Monster. If you are into the Flying Spaghetti Monster and you have been touched by his noodly appendage, as they say, get in touch with me. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have thoughts about it. If you want to add some commentary to the episode here, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment either on this video on YouTube at the This Uncanny Earth YouTube channel, or in the This Uncanny Earth official Facebook group. There is a little approval thing that you have to wait for us to approve you, but we probably will. I don't think we're just gonna be like, I don't know, we're not gonna ask you a bunch of questions. We usually just hit the button and approve everybody, unless you're already a known troublemaker, which is very, very rarely, if at all. So that's it. That's all I got. Flying Spaghetti Monster. This was the Saturday Spiritualist. Hope you enjoyed it. Shorty, but a good one. So, till next time, be well.